James Garfield was assassinated by someone who saw himself as essentially a political hack. Charles Guiteau initially did not want Garfield to win, but he hopped on the Garfield train anyway. At one time, he was part of a religious community who felt that Jesus Christ had already returned. They also believed in what was called complex marriage, which meant that any member of the group could sleep and have sex with any other member of the group as long as they consented. They also had unusual sexual practices rather, that we're really not going to get into. Guiteau tried law, theology, and bill collecting, but none of these seemed to work for him. Guiteau then decided to write a speech for Garfield that was never asked for and never given. Guiteau decided to have the speech published and had several hundred copies of it printed. The former bill collector, of course, did not pay for these copies after they were printed. Although he wrote a speech that was never asked for and never given or delivered, he convinced himself somehow that the pamphlets of his speech that he distributed was the reason that Garfield had won the election. And since he had won the election for Garfield, he figured he was due a job. So he wanted a post in Vienna, but he stated he would settle for a post in Paris. He spent the winter hanging around the New York Republican Party headquarters trying to get a job. They finally got him to go away. Then he went to Washington and again tried to obtain some sort of job. He eventually did get a meeting with Garfield, but Garfield refused him a position. Interestingly, at one time, his family actually tried to have him committed. And at one time he was committed, but he escaped. He then borrowed $15 from a relative to buy a revolver. He purchased the revolver that he thought would look best in a museum. He spent a few months following Garfield around, and once almost tried to kill Garfield, but Garfield was with his wife. Guiteau knew that Garfield's wife was suffering from an illness, and he didn't want to upset her. What a thoughtful guy. Guiteau had even asked for a tour around the jail in Washington because he was sure he was going to end up there. On July 2nd, 1881, Garfield was scheduled to give a speech and then go on summer vacation. Garfield went to the train stations with his two sons, the Secretary of War, William Todd Lincoln, the son of Abraham Lincoln, and the Secretary of State. When Garfield actually entered the train station, Guiteau stepped up behind him, then shot him twice from behind. And then he cried out, "My God, what is this?" He had arranged transportation. However, a policeman heard the shot and entered the station. He stopped him from fleeing, but he was so excited when he captured him, he forgot to take the gun away from him. Fortunately for the police officer, Guiteau decided not to use his revolver. He said he wanted Chester Arthur, the vice president, to be the president. Of course, this led to all kinds of conspiracy theories then. The theories were that the vice president was actually directing the assassination attempts. That didn't go far, though. It took Garfield a few months to die, and during the process, he lost about 80 pounds. Guiteau's brother-in-law would represent him in court. Guiteau would display some unusual behavior in the courtroom. He would insult the defense team, seek legal advice from people in the courtroom, and give his testimony in the form of a poem. He twice tried to commit suicide while in custody. He stated that it was God's will for Garfield to die, and if it was God's will, certainly it was not his fault. He tried to use the insanity defense, but it was unsuccessful. He was found guilty and hung on June 30th, 1882. He danced his way up the gallows, waved to the audience, and shook the hands of the executioner. He was then allowed to recite a poem he had written, which he called, I Am Going to the Lordy. Here are some verses of that poem. I am going to Lordy. I am so glad. I am going to Lordy. I am so glad. I am going to Lordy. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. I am going to Lordy. I love the Lordy with all my soul. Glory, hallelujah. And what is the reason I am going to the Lord? I love the Lord with all my soul. Glory, hallelujah. And that is the reason I am going to the Lord. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. I am going to the Lord. And it goes on for a few more verses like that. Wow, maybe he wasn't sane. If you like these short assassin videos, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks for listening.